Hey, I'm Kevin Longa, and this is Taste, a documentary series that reveals the true stories of the real people who make our food around the world. And this video is a bit different than normal because this is actually not just going to be a video. It's also going to be a podcast. So, I guess it's official. We're starting a podcast. And there's a number of reasons why I wanted to do this. First and foremost, a podcast is a long-form medium. And the people who I film often have deep and complex stories that can span an entire lifetime.
Since I'm 18 years old.
Sometimes I spent anywhere from 2 hours to several days online video chatting with a food entrepreneur before I film with them. These pre-interviews help me learn their story inside and out so that I know exactly what I need to film once I arrive on location. It's my job as a documentarian and editor to capture their story and distill it down to a 5 to 10 minute short film. This can be a very time-consuming process, especially in the edit room. So understanding their story in the pre-interview phase is crucial for an effective shoot. On top of that, I just miss talking with and filming with food entrepreneurs and chefs. Now that we all have to social distance and shelter in place, I'm just aching to talk with some of these friends and inspiring people I know. So I thought, why not share these conversations with you? Before long-form YouTube and online videos were a thing, I often had these conversations and pre-interviews with chefs and food entrepreneurs from around the world in private. We would talk about such fascinating recipes, cultures, places, and of course, stories, that I think it would be a shame not to share these moments that never make the final cut of my Taste short films. Plus, of course, the big elephant in the room is COVID-19 and how it has affected the restaurant and culinary industry. We often hear that it has hit small food businesses the hardest, but what I find so ironic is that news outlets and even the culinary industry does not often give a platform for these undiscovered chefs and food creators. So with these long-form videos and podcasts, I hope to understand from real food entrepreneurs how they are navigating this crisis and their entrepreneurial journey of how they got to where they are today. These are complex issues and stories that we're going to be discussing, and I'd love to have you join us. And on that note, if you're watching this as a video, you'll probably notice that there's a lot of fancy visuals and B-roll during this introduction that I'm giving right now. But once I start my interview with the chef or the food entrepreneur, it's just going to be us chatting via Zoom. So feel free to put your phone in your pocket and just listen to my interview while you're cooking, walking, or doing anything. In fact, that's what I do when I'm cooking. I'll pop open a long-form video or podcast and just get lost in an in-depth story. And I encourage you to do the same. I'll first be posting this episode on the places where I normally post videos, like our Taste with Kevin Longa YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook pages. But you'll also be able to eventually find these episodes on podcasting apps as well. For our inaugural podcast episodes, I thought we'd dive headfirst into some issues that I know are on a lot of people's minds lately. They're certainly on my mind, at least. Like, I was walking down the local retail street the other day and noticed that the Apple Store and the Gap, they pretty much have the luxury of boarding up their businesses and closing down temporarily. And this is, of course, amid COVID-19 and the recent Black Lives Matter protests. And I also noticed that a lot of businesses such as grocery stores and restaurants, they can't close because they're deemed as quote-unquote essential. The pandemic and the protests are bringing up a lot of overdue questions that we need to be asking. Questions about race, about how we treat essential workers, about our food supply, and more. But we're not going to be exploring these issues through statistics or sound bites like you normally see on the nightly news. Instead, I wanted to talk with food entrepreneur Nafy Flatley. I think she's uniquely qualified to answer some of these questions and share her story. Nafy Flatley is the founder of Longa, a food and beverage company that uses unique ingredients and recipes that she grew up with in her home country of Senegal in Africa. After graduating from high school, she decided to immigrate to the US in pursuit of her American dream, which, if you'll notice during our conversation, changes over the decades she has lived and worked here. We talk about her entrepreneurial journey with food, which, as it turns out, begins in her childhood when she and her siblings ate fruit from the baobab tree and cooked with her family. Her story is so comprehensive that I decided to split it up into two parts. The first will be about her origin story before opening Longa, and the second will cover the challenges she faces as a Black woman small food business owner, especially during COVID-19. Like all taste stories, I hope you're able to learn about a different nation, a different cuisine, a different culture, and a different perspective from a very unique person. I know I did. And without further ado, here's part one of my conversation with Nafy Flatley. Well, welcome, Nafy Flatley, to Taste. This is quite an honor having you because I think that food is something that people are taking a lot more attention to because, well, that is an essential service. And where their food comes from is something that's also important. And I think that Senegalese food is something that here in America, we don't know much about. In fact, I don't think I know much about. And so I just want to help tell your story. And I want to ask you first, could you kind of describe for me your childhood and what was it like growing up in Senegal?
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. This is such a great honor and pleasure to join you on Taste. Senegal was colonized by the French. And so growing up as a kid, I grew up in the capital, Dakar. That's where I was really raised pretty much my whole entire life until I moved to the United States. And so growing up there, it's a big city, it's just like any other cities like San Francisco where I'm living now. Big, government buildings, is a whole bunch of, roads, water running, all that. It's just exactly like a real city. And Senegal, Dakar, the capital where I lived, was very much influenced by French culture and my family as well, because during the colonization, at one point, the French have divided Senegal into different regions. And if some of your parents were born in some of the regions, they were like French naturally. And so Saint Louis, which is where some of my family is from, and then also another part of in my grandmother is the one that's from Saint Louis, and my grandfather is from another region in Kaolack. So they were able to benefit not only from being part of those regions, but also being able to raise and then live there while having the French be present still. So French are still present in Senegal, although we have our independence since April of 1960. They are still there. They are still present. They're still part of the government, still helping with some decisions. But like I said, when growing up in Dakar, I went to school there. I went up until high school, and living with my grandmother. My mom my mom is a single mother, so she raised 5 of us. We have 3 girls and 2 boys, and so growing up there in Senegal, in the capital Dakar, for me it was like I was always called by my cousins who didn't live in Dakar like the city girl, and I always loved, living there. Is a lot of beaches. I mean, it's just a beautiful place. It's just, it's open. It's like Dakar is the farthest point, like open into the ocean. So when you look at the map, Dakar is really like in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But it's like, I always describe it as like San Francisco Bay Area, but no fog. So, so growing up in Senegal as a young girl with sickle cell anemia, I really had to follow a lot of my mom's advice and my mom's trying to figure out ways that she can raise us in a very healthy way and healthy environment. And so she was very much into like organic foods, natural foods, grown her own food in the house or somewhere not too far from our house, and like in farms from her parents' farms and things like that. She was very much into like just healthy food, because the reason why she actually, I think, more so get into it is because she realized when we started taking those medication that were helping us when we had sickle cell crisis, which by the way, we have the trait, not really the disease. She found that those medication were really making us very ill, and she knew there was other ways that she could really support us and help us be well and be able to go to school. I used to miss school all the time because of, the crisis I used to have, the pain, the acheness, and all that stuff. And so pretty much she, just started making it a priority for her to get really good, healthy food for us. That's when my involvement with all these superfood, natural food that grow in Africa, really get became part of my life.
On that note of your family, let's talk about your grandparents. I hear that they actually lived in a village that surrounded a baobab tree. Could you tell me a little bit about what that was like growing up with that baobab tree, and what's the significance of the tree in Senegalese culture?
The village is called Tawa, so it's a couple miles, like about 200 miles plus from the capital, Dakar. And then, like I said, I'm a city girl, but then during the summertime, my mom will make sure that we go visit my grandmother and my grandfather. Actually, at the time, my grandmother moved to Dakar, so she was living there, and then my grandfather was still there. So we'll go and then visit. And for me, I always looked forward for those for the summer break, just because it's a totally different environment. I am able to run anywhere I want. I can just go in, like, I can go for miles and miles without having to worry about anything. I'm just like this wild animal, just run around and just have fun. And we with my cousins, we will go to like farms. We can eat mango as much as we want. Like, you can eat all the mangoes you want. You just climb on the tree. Just imagine, you see this huge big tree. You climb on the tree. You sit on top of it. You eat all the mangoes you want to eat. Nobody says nothing to you. It doesn't have to be a mango tree only. It could be like a pomegranate tree. It could be an orange tree. I mean, really different, all kinds of different trees. So when I go there, I am just like the happiest person. And you get the best milk ever. The milk is, right from the cow, just milk from the cow in like maybe an hour or so before. Everything is fresh and clean. So also being the one thing that I used to always look forward to also is going and playing around the baobab tree that was like right in the middle of the village. And so as you approach with this, narrow road, the first thing you see is this huge baobab tree that's been there for, thousands and thousands of years, way before any of us, anybody lived in that area. It's this beautiful, huge tree that's about 4 or 5 different stories. 30 people can stretch their arms and go around it. Sometimes you can see it's hollow in some areas, and you can go and hide in there. And it has this delicious and beautiful coconut-like fruit that I use in a lot of my products that I make. It's a sour, tangy, nutty, earthy. It's like the superfood of all the superfoods. It tastes really good. You don't need to do anything to it. You can just eat it just as is naturally, and you get all the benefit from it. And so it's just beautiful. It's just great. And then the flowers that comes out of it, they're really beautiful beige color, which sometimes people don't even see, because when you Google the baobab tree right now, all you see is a bare tree, no leaves, no flowers, nothing. And that's why it's actually called the tree of life. And then also the upside down tree, because the top looks like it's the roots.
The leaves actually are just as nutritious as, say, kale or spinach.
Yes, absolutely. The leaves, you can use them and use it in like salads. You can put them in stew. My grandmother would use it to make stews. And then also you can make pestos with it and then add it to different meals. You can use the powder for beauty, for your face, like every single thing on that tree is used. The roots could be used for medicinal purposes like stomach aches and then, or headaches. And also the other thing my grandmother used to do when I was sick, sometimes she would take the leaves and wet them a little bit to reduce my temperature. She will put them on my forehead and then tie a wrap around it. And then, believe it or not, I'll feel good. After a couple hours, I'm like good and running and out and having fun again. It's a sacred tree that is part of the Senegalese culture, and it's also part of the the government emblem. Everything in Senegal has like baobab tree symbols in it. So it's very well protected. Before the colonization, kings and queens used to be buried in there. And then I remember my grandmother was telling me that when the French came, they started cutting a lot of the baobab trees, and they started seeing all these remains and gold and pots and pans and all these things, and they were like, "What's going on?" So that's when people start telling them that these used to be places that kings and queens used to be buried in because of the spiritual value of the baobab tree, how just valuable, and then just how magical and how just wonderful it has been protecting and nourishing, the population around it. And also, it's another place that people use the baobab tree also use as a place for people to gather. I remember a lot of times when there's something to be said in the city, I mean in the village. Because my grandfather was the chief of the village, so if he has something to say, he'll just send the griot, which is the griot in a way. That's another way to be said. Have his drum or his talking drum go in the middle of right by the tree, just play something, and everybody knows that they need to gather. Someone is calling for something, and then everybody goes and gather. It's also a place that people we dance, we have parties, and then it's a place that my grandfather will sit down around and tell us stories. Horror stories sometimes, and sometimes other kind of stories that make him look like he's the hero. Like, oh, the day I fought the French, or the day I saw this lion and I fought the lion, and we would all crack up and laugh. And so, yeah, it's part of the culture, and it has a really big impact in my life, and I just it's my favorite tree. I just love it.
Would you cook with it when you were a kid? And I recall that you started cooking when you were 7 years old. Is that correct?
Oh yes. There was some of the meals I used to make when I was little, which is like the snacks, especially which are one of my favorite snack is dangalach, which is baobab with peanut butter, and you mix the baobab powder or the baobab pulp, peanut butter, a little bit of sweetener, and then you make on the side you make a cereal, but the cereal is a millet or sorghum cereal that you make by hand, and you roll it to make it like a cereal balls. And then you also add some coconut flakes. It's just one of my favorite snacks. I actually just made it 3 days ago, and I eat it sometimes for breakfast, or sometimes I eat it as a snack with the boys, the kids.
That sounds, oh my gosh, that sounds like one of those power breakfasts.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the minute I have it in a day, I mean, I can just go on on my day until like late afternoon. I don't have to worry about anything to eat until much later.
That's something that I need. Yeah, that's actually something I think here in America we definitely need, which I think is something that you're trying to work towards. In fact, speaking about America, you were introduced to American culture when you were a young child, or I should say maybe perhaps in your teens, and you had a very unique window into American culture through television. Could you kind of like tell me what your impression of America was back then, and what gave you that impression?
I've missed certain things, like just like birthday parties, just because my favorite show is going to be showing. And I say, why are you doing this during my show time? And so
what were those shows?
So many of those shows were like one of the first one that I really enjoyed and loved, that really influenced me into wanting to come to the United States after after I finished high school. This is just where I want to go. Is 90210. Watching that show, seeing Brandon working, having a car, and they live in this beautiful home. They are young kids, and they were taking care of themselves. And I'm like, I'm 14, 15, and I'm still living in my mom. I'm not done with school. Most likely what's going to happen is I'm going to be getting married maybe at 18 or 19 or right after school before I even go to university. I might be given for marriage and stuff. And I was like nervous and scared about that. I just didn't want that to happen for me. I wanted to have, a high degree. I wanted to explore things.
What did the Senegalese culture tell women to become when you were young?
During the time when I was growing up, most of the things that have been said to a young girl is, if you are good at school, go ahead, go to school until middle school. It's fine. As long as you know how to read, and to write and to speak the language, like which is French, which is the official language, and then you know how to write it, and then some. You can also write some Wolof. Once you know how to write, French, you will be able to know how to write Wolof as well, and you
And
find.
for listeners that don't know, what Wolof is the
Yes,
local
yes.
dialect in
Yeah,
Senegal.
yeah. Wolof is the Senegalese national language. So this is the language that everybody speaks pretty much in Senegal. I'll say maybe 85 to 90% of the population speak that. Even people who have their own dialect actually will speak that because it's just what spoken throughout the whole country. So that's what Wolof is. It's the Senegalese national language. And so you just find yourself being told that you don't need to have a high degree. You're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to stay home, you won't be working, your husband is going to take care of you, you don't need anything else. So why would you waste your time going to school if you know that even after you go to school, coming back home, you're going to be a stay-home mom? And I'm like, whoa. And I flipped out and watching what I was seeing on TV. I said there must be something here that I should follow that will actually make my life better instead of going through the traditional way. Yeah.
Then after that, after graduating from high school and going to private school in Senegal for all of your younger years, you then came to America. You decided you didn't want to go to France. You wanted to come to America, where perhaps you could live the 90210 dream. And you went to USF. And
Yes.
could you tell me a little bit about, like, what was it like when you first came to America? Did you have a culture shock, or did you feel like, wow, this is very different or very similar to what I experienced in those soap operas that I watched when I was a kid?
Yeah, when I first came, I went through New York. New York was the place that it was my port of entry. And the first thing I saw before we land, and this is like 1998, I told the air hostess that this is my first time flying. This is my first time being in an airplane. And this is my first time coming to America. And she said, really? So we became friends. Her and I really became friends. We're talking throughout the whole time because, at one point I was nervous when the plane would shake and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on and things like that. So she would come and calm me down and say, oh, it's all good. And I'm saying, oh, okay. And so I felt really comfortable. And she said at one point, I just spoke to the pilot and he said, if you want, when we are landing, you can come in the cockpit and you can watch us land. I'm like, really? And it happened. So I was right in front, sitting in a small chair next to them, watching. And the first thing I saw, I was just blown away. The lights, all these lights. New York was just like, I'm like, they're saying that Paris is the city of light. I don't think so. New York should be the city of lights. It was just light. And then I saw the first thing that really told me that I am actually really, truly in America was the Statue of Liberty. I saw it and I was like, oh my God, this is real. I'm seeing it in my own eyes. And it made it even better for some reason because we were delayed. We couldn't land because there was too many planes waiting and taxiing. And so they told us that we have to be flying around New York for another 10, 15 minutes, which was just like, I felt like it was God sent because this pilot was just so nice to me. He started flying different areas to show me more. It's like I was having a really private tour via air through this trip. And so when we landed, it was October. It was so cold. I've never been that cold. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was wearing my heaviest jacket. My mom bought me the heaviest jacket, the heaviest sweater, the boots that I bought. If I would have worn that in Senegal, I think I'll just melt, And I said, Mom, this is so warm. I don't think we'll need more than this. But when we landed, I was so cold. Those clothes I was wearing, my layers, it didn't even do nothing. So those little things made me like start realizing that I'm no longer in Senegal, seeing the Statue of Liberty, and then also seeing those limousines that I used to see at 90210, Dallas, Beverly Hills. All these other shows I used to watch afterwards. I'm like, oh my God. I was so happy. I was like just smiling. I'm like, yes, this dream is becoming true. Because for me, I was just always saying that I would like to go and live this American dream that people are talking about. They're saying this is the land of where everything can happen. You know, it's the land of freedom. It's the land um, of uh, opportunities, especially the opportunities for anybody, no matter what your color skin is, where you're from, who you are, as long you have a good brain and as long you know you are work hard, you work hard and you know what you want, you have a good trajectory and you know that you have a purpose of why you are going there or you are here, then you can make it. Anybody can really make it. So my first real impression coming to America and then seeing all those things that I listed, I was just like, wow, this place really do exist. It's not fake, number one, and then number two, it's 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 real. I'm definitely gonna make something out of this place. It's just amazing. Those were the first impression from like maybe the first 3 4 5 hours when I got in here. But then later on, as things go, 20 years later, things change a little bit my way, the way I seen it. If going back to that day and then now, a lot of things have changed. So I feel like if I knew what I know now, I would have maybe changed, or I would have looked at things differently.
What changed, or what impression of America changed for you over the years?
The fact that the fact that I was always told this is a land of opportunity, a land of freedom, a land that everybody can live life happy, no problem, no, just be happy, and and you can do anything. The sky is the limit. So that became not so much the reality when I came, because some of the first things I encountered were my accent. So when I talk to people say, "Oh, I don't understand what you're saying. Where are you from? Wow, your accent is so heavy." And then I start feeling down. Like I'm like, "Oh, you know, I can speak French. Maybe if I use my French accent, maybe that would be better." And it was just not like how I've seen it. I thought that when I spoke my English, people could understand me clearly, because in my head I understand what I'm saying, but then coming from my mouth, people would not 100% understand what I was saying. So then I start saying, oh wow, they see me really differently. They don't see me as just them, that I'm part of the population. They're seeing me as being a different person. And then they always ask me, you have a heavy accent, where are you from? Or they'll say, your features are totally different. Where are you from? And I say, what do you mean where I'm from? I'm from America. I'm from here. How do you tell? How can you tell I'm not from America? Because for me, I just came in and I embarrassed the culture. I just said, nobody would not that nobody will know or see that I'm different, but because I thought that this was the land where you're from, who you are, those things don't really matter. What matters is, what's in your heart, how you show and present yourself. Those are the things that matter. They didn't have to dig inside to talk about your accent, or that you don't you talk differently, you act differently, or things like that. You just part of a melting pot culture. That's what I always thought. I went going to Berkeley and then USF. I was the only black girl. I was the only girl my kind in those classes, and then I'm like, this doesn't feel comfortable, or this is different. How come there are not other people like different, just like me, or I can connect with, or they would no people from even Africa whatsoever. So it was just me trying to fit in and be able to show them that I have skills that I could that could be used to accept me into the circles that they were creating, or I wanted to be part of.
What did you feel like you had to do in order to fit in at that moment?
In some I had to show them up because a lot of my friends that I knew didn't know how to cook. So I had to really like bring up my cooking skills, which I always didn't want to show because, again, going back to Senegal, watching 90210, Beverly Hills, Dallas, and all those, people were always going to fast foods. I just were like, the first thing I'm going to go, I'm not going to be cooking. I've been cooking for too long. I just want to go and then go to McDonald's or go to Taco Bell and just eat, food from fast food, sit down in my car, all these different things, sit down in my car and watch a movie and eat my hamburger, and then I'm like, wow. But then getting sick so many times doing that, when I first came here, my body was just not taking it. I couldn't, not only for my skin, I had to adjust to the climate and the lotions, even the lotions that I brought, it couldn't, because of the change of weather, it won't fitting too well when I put it in my skin. So my skin, I had rashes and pimples and all these things which I never experienced before. And then I'll have stomach bloating all the time. I couldn't, because trying to fit in and eat all these junk food. And so I just started saying, you know what, I'm not going to be doing this. I think I need to just be who I am and not trying to fit in and embrace this new way of life that, to me, I see some people living like that, and I see other people who are scaling back and then also living a more natural and in a more a more independent way of living, like by making their own food, by going to the groceries, purchasing food, making it from scratch and fresh and all that stuff. So I started doing those things and I started feeling better, like in no time, like in a matter of a week or two, just like my whole body just changed completely. So I started inviting friends over. So I'll have these meals, we'll have little parties, Berkeley, it's so cool. I love Berkeley, and then so I'll have friends coming over. At the time I was living in Berkeley because I had to do some of my international curriculums and prerequisites there first. And then so I, have friends come over, we'll make some Senegalese food, whether it's jollof rice, so I'll make chicken, I'll make all kinds of stuff, I'll make juices and stuff. And so starting showing that part of me actually made things so much easier. And I started getting more friends and then having more people really seeing me totally different. My accent wasn't there anymore. People don't see me, or maybe they get used to talking to me a lot. And so I just started belonging. And prior to those few weeks or months, I remember calling my sisters, and they were living in France, and my mom, I don't want you to stay here. She said, what happened to Brandon? You didn't see Brandon yet? I said, no, I haven't seen nobody. I haven't seen
Brandon from 90210, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen Tom Cruise. I haven't seen Michael Jackson. I haven't seen none of these people where I am living. Because I was supposed to, one thing that I didn't mention to you was I was supposed to do, because I came here as an international student. And so I was supposed to go to Riverside. And then the reason why I picked Riverside is because it's in LA and it's like where all the things happen. And then during my flight from New York to California, I swear I just changed my mind because this professor told me that there's nothing in Riverside. There's no river. There's no lake. There's nothing there. And if you go there, you're going to regret it. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to like it. Just from having this conversation with this guy, I completely changed my mind from going to LA, and then I ended up in Berkeley. And so it was just this sudden change and he said, you can do it. It's a UC system. All these are UC system, which I didn't know even prior to coming here. You can register to any of the UC system. You just have to call the administration and they'll transfer you. So I had to change just from being in an airplane. The minute I landed in California, I switched and then not go to Riverside and then stayed here in the Bay Area instead. And so, yeah.
And since you were in the Bay Area, you went into the tech industry right after graduating college. Was that your idea of the American dream, was to work for a company? And
oh yeah, I always thought that a good way to live the American dream is after you graduate from school, which was things that were shown on TV, on all these shows and all these things I've seen, or the way they sell the American culture to us who are outside of the United States. When you watch TV or when you watch the news or anything, read books or the media or anything like that, the way they really show you and describe the American culture is you go to school, you have a good degree, and then the next thing you do is work for an organization. And then here, if you want to come to California, is work for the Silicon Valley, a company in the Silicon Valley, a startup company and all that stuff. So for me, I said, okay, I'm here. I finished college. I studied, I double majored in international business and marketing. And so now my next step, and I went to a very good school, and I said, okay, the next step is to work for a startup company or somewhere in the Silicon Valley. And so those were all the things that I wanted to do to pursue my American dream. And then when I got that, it was just, I had a job waiting 5-6 months after graduating, which is very difficult sometimes to get as an international student, but I was able to get a contract and then start working and afterwards become an employee. And that was just fun. And then the job I had was one of the most fun job, I was a marketing lead generation and also a marketing trade show manager. So I'll travel everywhere, all around the United States, all these events we will do. I used to do a lot of events at Cuisine, and this company was a software company. We will sell, our product to different companies who are affiliated with Microsoft. So I'll get to also travel to some Microsoft offices as well throughout the United States, training people, making sure that the events that they have in those offices were organized and well set up. So, and I was one of those people that were doing that. And so this was just things that I was doing that for me was exactly how I saw my American dream, take place and taking shape. So it was just, beautiful, living a happy life, getting paid, very well, and traveling, taking all the early flights every single time, traveling to New York. If it's not New York, it's maybe down in LA. If it's not LA, it's maybe Las Vegas. All these different cities, anywhere that Microsoft had an office, pretty much we would travel to those places, with the company I was working for at the time. Yeah.
And then life hits you a bit, and you have your first son, who actually came in at 4 pounds and 10 ounces, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yeah.
And that kind of took your corporate startup marketing life for a bit of a turn. Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got married in 2008. Yes, and then my son was born a year later in 2009. And so at the time I switched from the job, from the work I was doing with this company to another company, because as you know, the 2008 was 2000 crisis. So a lot of people get laid off, and usually marketing people and salespeople are the first people that get laid off usually. So I had to switch and take I was laid off pretty much. And then I was very lucky. I only waited maybe, or didn't have a job. I was jobless for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month, and I was able to find another job. And then starting with this new job with this new company, which this time was not a software company but a hardware company, but doing similar things that I've done in my previous job. And so here I am, with a new company, just got married, and then maybe a couple months after that, I got pregnant, and then my son was born a couple months, 9 months later, I guess. And so when that happened, things just changed completely. And this company that I thought I loved and knew, what I thought would be there for me as an employee, because I'm a hardworking person. I was doing everything I could to bring in enough sales, promote the company very well. Just turned their back on me, because when I had my son, who was born preemie, 4 pounds 10 ounces, I only had 6 weeks, and then during those 6 weeks, 2 of those weeks, I was in the hospital every day. Supporting my son, because he was there for two weeks, and then the other 4 weeks I'm home trying to get used to knowing him and supporting him and helping him when he left the hospital, he was a little bit over 5 pounds, but that's still this tiny little baby, I mean, I still remember holding him in my hands, and then I'm like, oh my God, this is so tiny, and I have only 1 week left to go back to work. How can I leave this kid with anybody? This is not humane. So I requested that if it's possible for me to take, a family leave or something, what could we do for me to stay home a little bit longer? They said, how long do you want? I said 2 to 3 months. And they just said, no, it's either the job or nothing. So I went back to work, started working couple of weeks, couple of months, and it was just very difficult. I'll go to work 6 in the morning because the company also had the offices international. So I would deal with the international offices 6 in the morning, and then I'll leave at 3. And then when I come home, my husband will go to work. During that time, I'll pump, and then I'll leave some milk. And then when I'm there, 30 minutes to go in milk. And those times, they won't know these beautiful nursing rooms that people have. There was nothing. I have to go in the bathrooms to do what I needed to do, or I'll have to put like papers against the wall so people don't see me when I'm pumping, which they could hear. And because the machines are so loud, they weren't quite machines back then. And so it was just very stressful and very hard navigating that. And I just didn't want to leave this, dream that started so nicely, and I was living it. It was so beautiful, come to the United States, living in the most beautiful, state in the world. I'm like, why does this have to stop now? This is what we all dream about. And all for me, that's what I've always dreamed about. This is what I saw to be the way to live my life and to live the American dream. Why does it have to stop now just because I have a child? And I start feeling like, are they blaming me for having a kid? Why does this just have to just suddenly and abruptly stop just because of that? And I didn't want to live in one income because San Francisco is a super, super expensive city at the time. Because when I was going to USF, I moved here. This is where I lived. I've been living here since then. And I just had to make a decision to keep working and make extra money and all these things, but then my son not getting all the attention he needed. So I just wake up one morning, didn't show up to work, emailed them and said, this was my last week. I couldn't do it. So, and then my son needed a lot of, attention, physical, occupational therapy and stuff. So I told him I won't be able to come back to the office because this week my son has a lot of appointments and things, which were absolutely true, that I need to deal with. And I'll finish up some of the projects that I've started, and that will be it. And that was just the end. So I'm here home, staying with my son, going out for walks and just brainstorming, thinking in my head, what have I just done? What is life going to be like living in one income with a child? And at the time, my mom was living here with us, and she started developing early dementia. And I'm like, what am I also going to do with her, support and help her and all these things? And it's just a lot of questions, a lot of things going through my brain, that I was just like, how unfair society can be sometimes towards certain conditions for certain people, But I had faith, and I just said, I know I am not a lazy person. I love to work. I know there are certain things I know how to do it. Maybe if I use those, I didn't know what they would be and how I could really pull them out. So show it to people to do it, because what I was doing, the marketing I was doing, I loved it. I would generate so many leads when we are at events, and turn them to hot leads where they become really valuable for the company. And I said, that's what I knew what to do. So what can I do with that kind of skill that I've had? So that's when I turned to my mom. Like, any kids, any person, even if you are any age you are, you always turn back to your mom, or your dad, your parents. They know you more than anybody else. And talking to them, brainstorming, it always helps. So I spoke to my mom and trying to figure out on a couple of walks that we did, what do I do? I cannot go and ask my husband to buy underwear. I don't want to go and ask my husband to buy toothpaste or toothbrush or makeup. I want to be able to buy those on my own terms and my own money. And so, that's again when I talk to my mom and trying to figure out what else can I do. And with all these overwhelming appointments I have to do for her and then for my son, where will I have even enough time? I started interviewing with other businesses. I said, let me just figure out, maybe I can find a job where I can be part-time and they'll understand my situation. And all these job interview, they'll see me, they'll say, oh, wow, we really would love to have you. This is great. I think you fit perfectly in this description. We love your enthusiasm. We love your energy. And then I'm like, oh, great. Well, I'll get the job. Maybe 20, 30 of those interviews I've done throughout those times before starting my own business. All of them at the end will send me email. Unfortunately, we had an overwhelming number of people that applied and we went with this person that we thought was better fit. And I'm like, what? Yeah, so it was just very difficult. So talking to my mother, we started brainstorming and figuring out. So she lists out a whole bunch of stuff, and then the other thing was going back to cooking, and which was something that actually helped me integrate. For the first thing, I was running away from it and wanting to eat all this fast food and then prepared meals and not wanting to go back to what I know better to do. And here again, talking to my mom, it looks like the solution is again for me figuring out my cooking skills. How do I use that to my benefit, and how do I use that to make it a career? How do I use that to make money off of it? How do I use that to take care of my family and live that American dream again that got interrupted? So, and she started saying, you know how to make juices, you know how to make food, how to talk to people and all that stuff. Why don't we just start making those juices we used to make back home? Because we used to make a lot of juices at home with popsicles, ice creams, and we used to sell them in the neighborhood and to friends and family. And so while I was in college, again, I used to, make those similar things for friends and family. And a lot of my friends used to say, oh my God, Nafy, you should open a restaurant. I'm like, a restaurant? Are you kidding me? I didn't see that in 901. No, none of them had a restaurant, or none of them, like in Dallas, all these people that have ranches with this and that. I was just looking at it in a just totally different way. And here I am, 20 something years later, finding myself using what I've done since I was 7 years old to be what actually is helping me to live the American dream I always wanted to live.
I hope you enjoyed part one of Nafy Flatley's story. She took us all the way from the villages of Senegal to the cities of New York and San Francisco, and every step of the way, her idea of the American dream evolved with her life, from the corporate path to the entrepreneurial path. That certainly resonated with me, as I mentioned in one of my recent videos where I talk about slow food and starting a food bike. When I graduated from college, I had this laser focus to enter the corporate world. And it took a disruption in my life, like the economic recession, to give me a reality check and figure out what it was that I was truly meant to do, which is very similar to Nafy Flatley's story. In fact, if you're a new grad or just thinking about doing a career or life change, then I highly recommend checking out that video I made, which I'll add to the show notes and description. On part 2 of my conversation with Nafy Flatley, we talk about the recent events of COVID-19 and the racial tensions in America and how that's been affecting her business and family.
In the last few months, to tell you the truth, it's been very difficult for me to take in my kids to bed. I'll be taking them in and, pre-COVID-19, and we'll be like, yeah, a couple months, we're going to go to Africa. I'm going to take you guys here and we're going to do this, or we're going to go to Tahoe, or we're going to go to New York to see your cousins. We'll talk about all these dreams. We'll talk about all these fun things. But now when I'm taking them in, I cannot even find words.
And we talk about what she's doing to navigate this crisis, her still evolving idea of the American dream, and how food will play a role for change.
To tell you the truth, the honest truth, that the reason why asking me this question about American dream, it's been, I cannot answer it anymore until change happen. And I truly believe that food can bring communities together, that food can support and help us in a way that people don't even know. This change that we are talking about can happen.
Since this is the first podcast I'm creating, I'd love to hear what you think of this in this video's comment section or as a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm testing out this format, and I think it would be a great platform to help undiscovered chefs and food entrepreneurs share their stories. On that note, if you know of a story that I should share here, then let me know in the comment section or DM me on Instagram. And as always, I'm still working on post-production of the first season of Taste with Europe. So if you'd like to get access to that, then you can sign up in the link in the description and show notes of this episode. There's still about 500 slots still open. Until next time, I hope you stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.